Welcome. Welcome to Satsang. I'm so glad you're all here and that we are together. And welcome, of course, to our family joining us from all over the world through this beautiful technology. And we begin, as usual, with one of the questions that comes in advance from our family all over the world, and then we'll open it up to any question that anyone here has. What do you consider the definition of peace? Rather than definition, I think let's talk experience. Because a definition we can all get by looking in a dictionary. Just Google what is peace. It'll give it to you in every language. It'll give it to you with all of the permutations. Let's talk, what is the experience of peace? And a lot of people think that peace is आप लोग बैठ जाओ, विश्व कुमार जो है अब बैठ जाओ, है ना, लोगों के सामने है, बस, thank you. The experience of peace is a lot more than people sadly think it is. A lot of times people think that peace is just an absence of war when we're talking about in countries or internationally. In our communities, we think of it as an absence of violence. Within ourselves, we think of it as an absence of conflict. But it's a lot more than that. Yes, of course, being free of violence is a precondition for peace. But that's the beginning, not the end. It's like if we talk about health, well, not having a fever, not having a cough, not having a bacterial or viral or fungal infection ravaging your body is obviously essential for health, but that's not really the fullness of health. That's just the beginning, kind of the bare minimum. And with peace, if it's just the absence of conflict, then peace would be empty. It would just be, okay, no conflict. But peace is actually something that is really full, kind of overflowingly full. And it's full of truth. It's full of joy. It's full of possibilities. When we live in peace, it means not just in this exact moment there isn't a conflict, but it means that who I am has become free of that which creates conflict. Let's say, for example, that I've got a really bad temper. And that really bad temper is rooted in deep anger, ego, attachment to things going my way, anchored in things that have happened to me in my past that I can't let go of. Okay? Now let's say that in this moment, I'm watching a funny movie. Okay? And I'm watching a funny movie and I'm laughing. Maybe I've got a bowl of popcorn. I'm eating popcorn or eating chips and watching a funny movie. I am in peace, you could say. But that's not really the peace we're looking for. That's just in this moment. There's nothing that's triggering my anger. In this exact moment, I'm temporarily free of that which triggers me, of the people I usually yell at. So most people with a bad temper tend to lose it at those closest to us most of the time, sadly. It's why when, someone goes out and commits murder, everybody says, my God, I thought he was just such a nice guy, right? Because acquaintances, neighbors don't necessarily know what a temper that person has. But those in the house usually do. So let's say, for example, that I am this person with this very bad temper. And at the moment I'm watching this funny movie, eating popcorn, eating chips, and the people I'm usually angry with, the people I usually lose my temper at, they're not here. Okay, maybe they've all gone out of the house. I'm home alone with a funny movie and a bowl of popcorn. So you could say I'm peaceful, right? I'm not yelling, I'm not screaming, I'm not doing anything. But nothing has actually changed in me. The moment the movie's over, the moment someone comes in the house, the moment something that I didn't want to happen happens, well, there I am, screaming, yelling, hitting, abusing again. So peace is not just a temporary, situation-based reprieve from an otherwise very conflicted environment. Peace is when, even when things are not going the way I want them to, even when people around me who trigger me are there, I'm still living in peace. Not because I'm biting my tongue, not because I'm, driving my fingernails into my palms to keep myself from screaming, but because I'm actually able to exhale in that moment. I'm able to be present with whatever the moment brings. Sunshine, rain, loss, gain, success, failure, people being nice, people not being nice, people being respectful, people not being respectful. That's peace. So peace, I think of it actually more as a full experience. Peace feels not like an emotion, but peace feels like a state that we are in, a place we are in that is unchanging, regardless of what's going on around us. So that's the experience of peace. That not in this moment I'm happy with my comedy and bowl of popcorn. But even if you trigger me, even if you send me a nasty text message, even if something I wanted to happen doesn't happen, even if other people are being obnoxious, being rude, even if the universe acts in a way that isn't what I want, I'm still able to be in peace. So that's the experience of peace. And when we take it onto a level of our countries internationally, again, it's not just a temporary ceasefire. Anybody who's lived in countries at war know that a temporary ceasefire is still very, very, very stressful. It doesn't feel like peace. Because you know, the moment either side does something, or is even suspected of doing something, or suspected of planning something, suspected of even thinking about something, the other side retaliates. And so it's a very, very tenuous ceasefire. It's not peace. And so in our world and in ourselves, which by the way are not separate, we need to find and create that experience of peace, where whether it's a family member in my home, a colleague, a neighbor, an employer, an employee, another country, the leader of another country, whatever they do, I'm still in peace. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to trigger me to give up my peace. Because my peace is very precious. Most of us take our peace as very sasta, very cheap. Every random person who cuts us off in traffic, we're like, okay, take my peace. Every random person who insults us, we're like, okay, here's my peace. Itna sasta nahi hai. Your peace is not something that cheaply should be thrown around. It's very precious. Be very careful of who and what is really deserving of you handing your peace to them on a platter. Because otherwise, every 2 minutes, this one does this one does that, this guy didn't stop at the light, or he stopped for too long, or he stopped too short. Everything. We are just like distributing pieces of our peace all over the place. You take some, you were obnoxious. You take some, you were rude. You take some, you cut me off. And then we wonder why we're not in peace. And then we go to, trainings and courses to attain peace. If we just could hold on to what we had and stop handing it out like, it was snow in the winter, we would be in peace. But in order to do that, we have to actually find within us, and this is that ultimate experience of peace, we find within us that source. Because as long as my peace is dependent on things outside, it's always going to be tenuous. Things outside go my way, I can be in peace. They don't go my way, I won't be in peace. But that puts me in a very risky situation. Hang out around the wrong people. Find yourself, in the wrong cubicle area of an office complex. Have the wrong neighbors move in next door. And suddenly your peace is gone. And so instead, what we need is to really rediscover that source of peace within ourselves. that is there because the core of who we are is divine. And the nature of the divine is love, is peace, is light. And so that source of all of that is within us. That's the source to connect to. So that regardless of what's happening outside, you're able to be in peace. And when you've got that, then you're going to find that you actually have a lot more than peace. You have peace, but you also have joy. You also have love, regardless of who outside might be loving you back. You've got love blossoming inside you. Because that source of love is within us as well. And when I'm able to find that source of peace, I find the source of love as well. And then we're able to live in peace, in love, in joy, due to an inner source. And then we overflow. We overflow with love and peace and joy, and we share it with others. And in some cases, we get love and joy back. In some cases you don't. But we are overflowing. And so that which we really need is being created within ourselves. And then that's what makes that state consistent. Not just based on a certain time or place. And that's, of course, what we need in our nations as well, is an understanding of peace, a definition of peace, an experience of peace that isn't just we're not throwing bombs on each other, but actually a peace that includes ensuring that everyone has food to eat, that everyone has a roof over their heads, that everyone has access to medical care, that everyone has access to water, that no one's human rights are being oppressed. Because just because we may not be bombing the country next to us, if people in our country are being oppressed or are living on the streets, or are sick and don't have access to medical care, well, we can't say that we've got a peaceful country or a peaceful society. Those people are not in peace. And so we need these expanded understandings of peace for ourselves and for our societies. If anyone here has a question, I would be happy to take it.
Namaste, Sadhviji. My question is an extension of what you have just said. So, the question was about peace, and you have said that basically because of the external environments, there could be certain conflicts and violent situations which causes conflict, or let's say peaceless in the mind. So, my question is, and you've also talked about peace, love, and joy. So my question is it the same mind which creates both this conflict and violence kind of situation, and the same mind creates this love, joy, and peaceful situation? Or is it altogether different zone which you call as love or peace, which is not of mind, is it something beyond?
Beautiful. Beautiful. So, without getting into too long and involved of an explanation around the mind and the brain, which are separate but of course interlinked, without getting into a very long and involved conversation around the mind and consciousness, which is, again, interlinked here but its own topic as well, let us just say for here the conflict is absolutely created by the mind in the mind, by what we call ignorance. You can think of it, some religious traditions in the world talk about what's called original sin. We speak about original ignorance. And that original ignorance is the ignorance of the truth of who you are. That original ignorance that instead of understanding that you are soul, spirit, divinity, thinks that you are this body, thinks that you are your history, thinks that you are your roles, your identities, your personalities, your bank account, your social status. And in that ignorance, if that is all who I am, then I need to protect it. I need to make it more and better. So there's going to be competition, there's going to be jealousy, there's going to be greed. If someone tries to interfere with me trying to make my ignorant understanding of self more, better, I'm going to get angry. Someone stands in my way, I'm going to get angry. So this is where that ignorance leads to suffering. And that's why what we understand as original ignorance is what leads to suffering. The reason we suffer is because we identify as this body, as these roles, as these stories. So we carry stories from our childhood, patterns from our lives. They cause us to suffer. We develop ways of being in anger, in greed, in jealousy, in competition. We suffer because having those thoughts makes you suffer. Long before I hit someone else or insult someone else or punch my fist through a wall, I'm already suffering inside that anger that leads me to shout at someone. Well, it's being created. It's created in my mind, but the mind grabs the entire body along. When you are angry, you feel it in the body. Your heart rate goes up. Your blood pressure goes up. Your face gets red. Your hands get sweaty. It grabs the whole body. Your digestion stops. That's why they say you should never eat when you're angry. Never discuss those sorts of things that make you angry around the dining table. Ruins digestion. Should be very, very careful what sorts of conversations we permit around our table. Or are we watching the news that makes us angry while we eat? Scrolling our emails, seeing things that make us angry. So anger grabs the whole body as well. But it's created in the mind. Because I've identified as just this body. And so, well, if this is all I've got, I mean, really? 4 or 5 200 rupee saris? Well, that's nothing. I should have more, right? So then you get greedy. Then you wander down the street and you're like, oh my God, that person has, very nice things. I should have that. Why that person? Why not me? Then you start plotting. Right? So the mind creates suffering, rooted in ignorance. And then, of course, we bring suffering to others. does the mind create consciousness? No, it doesn't. Consciousness exists regardless of what state our mind is in. But whether I am able to be conscious of consciousness depends on my mind. So if I take a bunch of drugs, or I drink a bunch of alcohol, or I get bad brain damage, I'm no longer going to be able to be conscious of consciousness the way that I am when I'm sober with my brain intact. It's why people do things under the influence of drugs and alcohol that they later say, oh my God, I cannot believe I did that. Who was that? Right? And these days everybody's got a phone, so everybody's videoing everything. You're like, yeah, that looks like me. Those are my clothes. But that wasn't me. Who was that? Well, consciousness existed, but I was not conscious of it. My brain/mind, for this purpose, was hijacked, literally, by the drugs, by the alcohol, or damaged by the brain damage in such a way that it's no longer able to be conscious of consciousness. But consciousness still exists. In the same way, love, peace, well, those are truth. Those are part of the nature of who we are. That has nothing to do with our bodies or our stories, and has everything to do with the fact that we have been created, not just by the Creator, but of the Creator. That the core of who we are is love, is joy, is truth, because it is divinity. If my mind is under the influence, drugs, alcohol, brain damage, or anger, or stress, right? We speak about drugs and alcohol, well, they're just chemicals in our brain. So are the chemicals that flood our brain in stress and in anger. So even if in that moment I am wrapped up in anger, the core of who I am is still love, peace, truth, joy. I'm just not able to access it in that moment. So we need our minds to be healthy, to be sober, to be calm and relaxed, so that we are able to access that truth of who we are. But it's still the truth of who we are, even if we can't access it. But then we're not able to benefit from it. Then we're not able to grow and blossom in that. Yes, sure.
I have to get up?
No, you don't have to get up.
Okay.
The mic is just so that the people joining us in the on the internet all over the world can actually hear you. Then the mic goes in, because otherwise they can't hear when people are far away.
Pranam, ma'am.
Yes.
Sadhviji, my question is, like when I was a young girl, I used to get angry and I used to use sometimes very harsh words, but I was ignorant about that kind of temperament. And I was at peace at that time because I was ignorant. More and more I'm getting mature. I'm aware of my this harsh words or aggression or anger. I'm more miserable. I'm not at all at peace. So this awareness has made me more miserable as compared to that ignorant stage.
So I would say that when you were young, if you were getting angry a lot and using very, very harsh words against people, I'd say you weren't in peace, but that you weren't conscious enough of what's going on. When we're young, we're very reactive. We're very reactive to the world around us. But living in impulse, living in instinct, living in reaction is not our highest goal. But it is what happens a lot when we're young as we grow, especially if there are things going on that are making life difficult for us. And if you had a tendency toward anger as a young girl, I would say that something was going on in your life, in your family. Not that necessarily was bad or wrong. You know, we see it a lot with kids who suddenly have a new sibling, a younger sibling, right? You've got a 5-year-old child, let's say, who spent his or her whole life being the only one. Now suddenly there's a new baby. Now suddenly that child gets angry, develops anger problems, or is acting out. It's not that the parents have done something wrong, but in the child's mind, their love has been withdrawn. Because now everyone's paying a lot more attention to the brand new baby. And the 5-year-old is sort of expected to suck it up and be the big boy now or the big girl now. And little things like that. I say little not in terms of the impact, but in terms of how common they are. Nonetheless, in many, many cases, have impacts on us like that if we don't examine them. So when I say something was going on, I'm not saying that somebody was necessarily doing something wrong. We see it with children when parents get divorced. We see it with children whose parents work so much that they never see them. Again, the parents are doing the best they can, trying to give their children the best opportunities, trying to provide for them. But in the child's mind, who wants mom or dad there, why are you not reading me a good night story? Why do you not get home to say good night? It creates, not always, but it can create anger. So I would say that there was anger in your youth, but that you weren't clear enough to be aware of it. Children are not growing with the awareness that the reason I'm now a bully on the playground is because I've got this little sibling. And I've really been angry since the day she was born. They're not that introspective, right? So you could say, oh, that kid's in peace. But schoolyard bullies are never in peace. Rule of thumb, there's always something going on. Otherwise, you don't take out anger on other people. We only share that which we have. If what we're sharing is anger, it means that's what's inside. It's why being around people who are happy is so much more fun than being around people who are not happy. Right? We've all seen it. You have a friend or friends who you know are going through a hard time. You want to be there to support them. And yet, after a while, you find yourself getting kind of drained. Like it's no longer enjoyable to be around this person because they are always negative, always complaining, always cranky, always upset. And people a lot of times find themselves caught in that wanting to be compassionate, wanting to be caring, But inside, we're no longer enjoying actually being with that person. Whereas when somebody's happy, genuinely happy, those are the types of people we actively like to be around. Because they're sharing happiness. So I would look back at your childhood, not in a woe is me, get stuck in your childhood way, but just with a little bit of introspection that's aware that maybe the anger you're feeling now started many, many decades ago. And now, as you say, as you're growing, that anger makes you miserable. So the question then becomes, when it's something that makes us miserable, and it's something that makes other people not want to be around us, why do we hold on to it? There's that beautiful saying that getting angry is like drinking poison and expecting the other guy to die. You're angry at someone or something, but ultimately you're the one suffering. They may know it, they may not know it. They may care, they may not care. But they're certainly not losing sleep over it. You're losing sleep over it. And in a way, that's good. Because it makes you know, I need to be free of this. And so I would look back at when was the first time you remember really having a temper tantrum, really losing yourself, really in your childhood. See if you can, just for the sake of insight, get a little bit of clarity into when this might have started. And if you can't remember, don't worry. But I'm always fond of insight. I think it's something very beautiful to help us understand this karmic package we have, this particular journey that we are on, and this body, this story, this particular karmic journey. So try to go back and see if you can remember the first time that you got really angry. What triggered it? It'll give you probably some insight into what's going on. And then look at yourself now. What is it that triggers you? Chances are a lot more triggers you than when you were young. Because as we speak about a lot here, getting angry actually makes me more likely to get angry in the future. You can't get it out. It's not food poisoning. It's not a tumor that you can just get out and be done. Every time you lose yourself in anger, you create that sanskara even deeper, that impression even deeper. You're more likely to get angry in the future. So you need to now just decide, enough. Enough. Start building a toolbox of when you start to feel anger bubbling. What are your tools? So we've got tools of a walk around the block, right? A nice walk in the fresh air. Tools of a glass of water being drank very slowly. Tools of counting to 100. Those are sort of the easy ones. Simple ones, I should say. Then you start to develop tools like meditation. Pranayama. Pranayama is a very interesting thing to do when you're angry, because anger changes our breath. It makes it very shallow. It makes it very short. It brings it all the way up here, right? We're really angry. We really get angry, okay? If you can start to do pranayama and actually grab control of your breath, it'll change the emotional experience. And then from pranayama, you can go into meditation. So those are in the moment, what to do when you notice it arising. And slowly, slowly, it'll have less of a hold on you. But along with that, you also want to shift the personality from the one who gets angry to the one who's infinitely patient and giving. So start bringing some new things into your life. Bring in a new seva project. Bring in some new ways of really being beautiful to other people. Right? If you find yourself in line at the coffee shop, buy the cup of coffee for the person in front of you or the person behind you, for no reason whatsoever. Just because as you do it, it's going to change how you think about yourself. Just go out of your way to do as many things as you can. You're in line? Let someone cut in front of you. Why don't you go ahead? Again, no reason. Just to retrain how you think of yourself. And slowly, slowly, that whole personality will change. If you've been trying them and they're not working, what it means is that there's something deep inside of you that needs to be worked through. And I would go back again to those early days when you got angry and see what triggered it. What is the root of your anger? If you're not going to get rid of it, fine. Go into it. You know, when I first moved to Parmarth Niketan, we have these prayers at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they used to be compulsory. So I was there every morning, and I never had been used to sitting cross-legged. Just in America, we tend not to spend very much time sitting cross-legged on the floor. And although I was a yoga student, nonetheless, I was not advanced enough as a yoga student that my hips and my knees were really flexible and I could just keep sitting. So the prayers usually go an hour. It's half an hour of prayers and then half an hour of a talk in Hindi. And what I would find is that after about 35 minutes or so, my hip would just start burning like it was on fire. And some days, winter time when there were a lot fewer people in the Satsang Room, I could very easily kind of stretch my legs out and, change the cross of my legs and no issue. But in summertime, when it was really crowded, there wasn't any space. There was another woman basically like right here, essentially in my lap. There was no way to change the cross of anything. And I developed, in the beginning it would really bother me. It's hurting. And I first tried to just meditate it away. Like I just wasn't going to pay attention to it. Just wasn't going to pay attention. But it hurt too much. And my hip was on fire, and I then discovered that since I couldn't pretend it wasn't there, I couldn't ignore it, I couldn't meditate it away, I was just going to turn all my attention to it and literally dive into that fire. And I started actually making kind of a joke out of it. I don't recommend this for your anger, but I started making kind of a joke out of it, and I would say to my hip, "Come on, is this the best you can do? Can't you get a little hotter? Come on, keep burning, I'm still here." And what I discovered was that the more I taunted it, the less it hurt. And the more I really dove into it, the less it troubled me. Now, in your case, I wouldn't begin by taunting it, because there's clearly something serious that is going on. But if you can't outrun it, and you can't meditate it away, dive into it. The anger is coming. You know a glass of water is not going to work. You know a walk around the block isn't going to work. Fine. Sit down and get angry. But not with your mouth, not with your fists. Sit down, close your eyes, and just allow the anger. Just feel yourself burning in anger. And as you do that, try to bring some awareness to it. What is that anger saying? Don't allow yourself to get stuck in whatever story it's telling you this time. This person said this. Don't allow yourself to get sold off so cheaply. Go into the depth. What are you really angry about? Where in your body does it feel angry? What color is the anger? Really look at it. What is it trying to tell you? See what it says. Yeah. Yes. Did you have your hand up? That's okay, no problem. I thought you had just raised your hand. Yes. Yes, sure. Acha. Him and then you. Okay.
Thank you. Actually, I would like to connect to this question.
Sure.
And I would love to ask about the anger and the rage expressed, for example, through Kali, or in Polynesian goddess like Enpele, like in Christian tradition, when Jesus came in the holy temple and he is like smashing the tables, like this divine rage, no? Like, as it feels like there is also the time and place for everything.
Beautiful. Anger is an energy. And yes, we've got stories from so many of the religious traditions of that energy. Whether we look at Jesus, whether we look at Moses, whether we look at Kali, whatever we're looking at, you're right. So here's the difference. That divine expression is an energy for transformation. It's not that the one who was angry has lost themselves. If you're speaking about the energy of Kali, it's not that Kali has lost herself and is out of control, and therefore is this expression. It is a movement of divine energy for transformation, of which she is in full control of the entire time. I don't know that story of Jesus. I was raised in a Jewish family and now have spent 25 years living in a beautiful world of Hinduism. But nonetheless, I would venture to say that those who are scholars of Christianity, those who are deeply devout Christians, would not say that Jesus lost himself, that Jesus was overcome by this uncontrollable rage, but that rather in that moment, through him, an energy of transformation was happening to teach a lesson, I imagine, to those who would have been there at that time. We go home and we punch our fist through a wall. We go home and drink, a 6-pack or 2 6-packs of alcohol to take care of the anger. Or go home and beat a wife or beat a child to take care of the anger. This is anger that is eating us inside, not an energy of the universe for transformation that is flowing through us to teach, transform others. It's like teachers in school will sometimes, frequently even, show anger. There are times in administration, times when you're teaching, times when you're parenting, that you have to get strict and strong and angry in order for whomever you are teaching to understand, this is not a joke. Now they're serious. But there's a big difference between bringing the energy of anger for a purpose and losing yourself in it. Normally when we are angry, we are out of control. We are unconscious. In those examples, they are examples of divine beings moving energy through them consciously for a specific purpose. Like teachers do with students in school, good teachers. With students in school, when they realize, all right, until I yell, nobody's going to take me seriously. No one's going to listen to what I say. It's like parents. You're sitting with a toddler in your lap and there's an oil lamp or a candle. And the child keeps reaching for the flame. And you say, don't touch it, sweetheart. Don't touch it, sweetheart. Don't touch it, sweetheart. And you keep gently bringing their hands back. And they keep reaching for the flame. And eventually you go, now the child cries. But the child has stopped reaching for the flame. Now, that was a parent bringing an energy through such that the child, for God's sakes, would stop trying to touch fire. Not just this time it's easy, move the candle. But what it means is this child has a tendency to be reaching for fire. And sometime the mother's not going to be sitting there able to pull the child's hand away. Better that the child understands and relates, fire, pain, and no longer reaches for it. So that's what that energy is. Yes. Yes.
May I ask the discernment? Yeah, because it feels like the line between the righteous anger and would be like challenging to discern.
Discernment, absolutely. Absolutely, discernment. This third eye, what's called the Agya Chakra, where we put the tilak, where we meditate on our third eye, is the energy center of what we call vivek, or discrimination. Discernment. That ability to see light from dark, truth from untruth, and ultimately that capital T truth, to see the divine in all, the essence, the content, rather than the form. Beautiful. Sure.
कोई प्रश्न नहीं है, सिर्फ उन्होंने जो कहा ना वो बारे में 2 शब्द कहना चाहूँगी।
Sure.
हिंदू वैदिक शास्त्र में, हिंदू स्क्रिप्चर्स में जो इस तरह कोई बड़े उद्देश्य के लिए जब गुस्सा किया जाता है जिसमें मेरा कोई भी स्वार्थ नहीं है, तो उसे मन्यु कहते हैं। मीन्स नॉट एंगर, इट्स मन्यु, स्पेशल वर्ड फॉर दोज बड़े उद्देश्य के लिए जिसमें मेरा कोई खुद का स्वार्थ नहीं है. इन्होंने जो कहा टीचर, दैट इज मन्यू, नॉट एंगर.
What she said is that in our
थैंक यू.
sure
नमस्कार. धन्यवाद.
in our tradition, when someone brings that energy of anger for our benefit, that it's actually not even referred to as the word anger, but it's referred to in the word manu, meaning it's actually a blessing for us that someone has brought that energy to teach us. Now, obviously, discernment is required, because just because someone happens to be older than you are, or happens to be in a position of power, does not give them by any means the blanket right to lose their temper at you and call it manu. We'll take your question tomorrow. That's okay. Have a beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. And a beautiful morning and day for our family joining us from all over the world. And we'll see you all tomorrow.